Hello, and welcome to The Confident Commit, the podcast for anyone who wants to join the conversation on how to deliver software better and faster.
If you're looking to build a trusted ship, tune in, let's confidently commit.
I'm your host, Rob Zuber, CTO at CircleCI, industry leader for all things CI and CD. Today, I'm joined by Cate Huston, engineering director at DuckDuckGo. Cate, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I am super looking forward to this. As I was just saying, I am most of the way, I'll be honest, most of the way through your book, which I see on your bookshelf behind you.
This is my only successful self-promotion is to just stick it on the bookshelf behind me.
Well, I mean, I knew about it before seeing that book on your bookshelf, so I think you're doing something right. That's where I'm going to start. Like, we've obviously seen each other at conferences and other places where you've been so generous in sharing, your learnings. And in particular, we connected over Toronto raccoons, but that
Toronto raccoons are the best raccoons.
A topic for yes, by some measure of best, most skilled, yes, and most resilient of raccoons are in Toronto. Which actually, oddly enough, this is not where I was going first, but someone was asking me last night how I pronounce the word Toronto, because that's what exposes actual Canadians versus people pretending to be Canadians. And I was like, well, when I lived there growing up, it was Trana. But when I'm outside, and which I have been for a very long time, I sort of enunciate it in order to help others know what I'm talking about.
Oh, right? Hilarious.
Which is, yeah. So people that live in Toronto do not say Toronto. That's my, and I'm sure the raccoons don't say that either. Anyway, one of the big topics that I picked up as a theme overall, sort of pulling out some various different things, is really like, I'll call it self-management, but you have a section on being the directly responsible individual for your own career. So as an individual, how you think about developing yourself and taking some responsibility for that. You have some sections on sort of energy management, which is a concept that I've loved for a while, but I think you did a really great job of sort of covering it. And a lot of that, to me, when I think of it as a theme, is about really taking care of yourself so that you can show up and be an effective member of a team versus this notion that many people have that I have to sacrifice myself in order for the team to have great outcomes. So I want to get a little bit of your broader perspective on that. In particular, when was that realization? Like, how did you sort of start to see that pattern? Where do people sort of fall down? And then what should they be doing to think about, helping themselves to help everyone else succeed?
Yeah. So actually, I remember a friend of mine said to me ages ago that he had started having career conversations. Like, one of the things they did where he was working was they started having career conversations with women that worked there, because they had discovered that these women thought that career development was getting promoted. And so they started being like, oh, actually, this is not true. And like, let's start having conversations about what that is. And I was a bit like, wait, shit, it's not getting promoted. So I think that was kind of, that was like a bit of an awakening moment. And then, the more I kind of thought about it, sat with it, is like, oh yeah, like if you talk about review cycles, I like to call them the scorecard of capitalism. And capitalism is a con. And so, like, if you're in an organization and your review cycle, capitalism will give you a scorecard, and you get to decide how much you really care about capitalism scorecard, right? Maybe capitalism is like, you could be producing more value, and you're like, but you know what? I like my life where I have free time, Or you can be like, this is what I want to maximize my value into capitalism right now. And then you also, again, have two options. There is where you're at, and there is like what your value could be on the open market. And I do think that the way like organizations are kind of incentivized to give you a narrow framing. And so it has to be your responsibility to take a broader framing of that, because only you can make the decisions about how you really want work to fit into your life.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, you mentioned capitalism there. One of the other concepts that was definitely new to me, I hadn't really thought about before, is this buying versus renting. Like, like what you bring to the table and sort of the interaction that you have with the organization, right? In the sense, and to your point, I guess, of what the organization wants from you. Like, I think there are organizations that are very open about this, right? Like, let's think about what the organization needs, what you need, and how we can put those things together and get the best outcomes for everybody. And if that's not the best thing for you and for us right now, like, let's just be open about that too, because we want to see you develop. Not all organizations are like that. But I think this like really understanding that as an individual, I think, is helpful. And so tell me a little bit, like, I guess, how you came to that notion, this buy versus rent thing, and then I guess explain it for people that haven't read it.
How did I come to that notion? I don't remember how I came to that notion. I think, I guess at my last job, I saw a lot of people who had stayed there for a long time, and I think in many ways that's great if people are growing the way they want to, if they're like expanding. But I would also see people and I would look at their work, their job title, and what I knew of the open market. And it was just really clear to me that they were like, because this organization ran in such a, some might say weird, some might say unique way, that they were moving away from what the market values. And so maybe that makes sense for some people. Like, I'm very much not in like some decisions are good and some are bad. I think all decisions can be fine, but I think you should make the kind of riskier decisions mindfully, right? And if you're in a situation where you're like moving away from the open market, then it like does two things, right? One is, if you wake up one day and realize you hate your job, you're going to have a really hard time finding another one. And two, even if you kind of get to a place and you're like, I'm going to take it, like you're maybe going to have to take a pay cut, right? And so if you're like, I'm maximizing this, I'm doing these things, I'm betting on my stock options. I think a lot of us in tech, we stay in a weird place to bet on our stock options. But are you making a mindful bet on that? Or are you kind of drifting away and like later you'll come to it and you'll regret it, right? Because the other side of this is, as a hiring manager, the thing that makes me most sad is when I see somebody who seems like smart and competent and they've spent too long in the wrong job. And, I think it makes me even sadder when I see they're just not being realistic about what they can expect, You
mean in terms of what then they can bring to somewhere else based on what they did?
Yeah.
Like the thing that they got.
Think about the kind of person who gets like a bad junior job out of college, right? And so they've not learned the things that make them a good software engineer, but they've persevered in this bad environment for 5 years. And now they think they're a senior engineer, but they don't actually know how to architect things. They don't know how to write tests. They don't know how to, they just know how to operate in that one bad environment. And that's somebody who's like, maybe they have the title of senior engineer, but they have the skills much closer to like a mid-level engineer. And so that person's going to live in dissonance. And if somebody can kind of look at the market, be self-aware, be like, oh, wow, I spent too long here. I should have left 3 years ago, but the best time is today. And I'm going to take a drop in job title. I'm going to take a drop in comp, and I'm going to work my way back up with the skills that I now realize I've missed.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do, but like, I think a lot of people don't,
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it goes back to your point about like promotion being career progression, right? Like the only good thing I can do from this point is to get the next title versus I have a toolkit, right? And my toolkit has a gap in it. And whatever it is that I do that goes and fills that gap will actually like massively accelerate my ability to get the title after the next title and the title after that, if that makes sense. Like, not that we're all pursuing titles, but if I really want to grow, like I love that perspective. Let me sit back and think about what it means to be successful at the levels above this. And I will both claim to have had no clue. Actually, it's all the same thing. Like, have had no clue and just gotten really lucky. Had spending early parts of my career doing totally random different things with no progression. Which kind of helped me build a unique toolkit that then I could go use later. People ask me, how do you get to this role? And I'm like, I don't know. These are the sort of weird random things that I did. I spent some time as a product manager, as a head of business development, like things that no person aspiring to get into a CTO role would probably do. But each of those things helped me once I've gotten here. And I feel like it wasn't that I was conscious in the way you're describing, but rather I was just fumbling around and got lucky and sort of built a toolkit. And so in hindsight, it sounds great, but I think it aligns with that picture, which is that there doesn't have to be that linear progression. And taking stock, I think, is really valuable. And we sort of drifted from this, but my big takeaway in that is, one, in an effort to make your team successful, your organization successful, knowing what you bring to the table and making sure you're in a good spot to bring that to the table, all feels very valuable. And two, I guess more broadly, like doing things that you really enjoy tends to make you more successful. And so knowing that, like all of this sort of self-assessment, making yourself comfortable, like those were the things that I was really thinking about as I was listening to you.
I wouldn't say you have to enjoy it, but I think you have to have a like higher reason for what you're doing. Like, honestly, being like in senior leadership, you just have to do a lot of terrible things, right? Like you have to have the conversation that nobody else wants to have. You have to like turn on the pressure when stuff like it's not like I'm the kind of person that's like, oh, my great joy in life is to show up and make somebody miserable or scared. Like it's really not, right? But I enjoy the outcomes. Do you know what I mean? Right. I find it interesting to run a large organization. I really want to have a functional team. And so then, like, even when I'm not, like, enjoying the specific task, I have this higher kind of purpose that everything ties to for me, right? And it's not something that, like, fingers crossed next year I'll get promoted, right? It's like there is a shorter feedback loop on me feeling like what I'm doing has value. I also think that this, like, mindset that you should, like, martyr yourself for the team is just... I mean, I have a whole rant about servant leadership, but I just think if you if you see yourself as the servant of people, then you have like given away all your power, right? Like how can you hold people responsible? How can you, and if you're like running around doing all this kind of small stuff, how can you think deeply about the bigger picture of your team? Because that is your job. Right. And so like I kind of despise the frame servant leadership because I just think it's something people use to feel better about themselves. They're like, oh, I practice servant leadership, and it's like, do you? Do you really? Like, and like, I think it's much, I practice humane leadership. I try to practice strategic leadership. I don't think I'm above any kind of particular task, but I'm also not going to spend my life running around after other people because it's my job to be in front of them clearing the path.
Yeah. I love that perspective. And I think it more broadly hints at a thing that we do. And by we, I'm saying like all of software engineering or whatever as a community, but maybe just the world, where we like to take, we have a concept and we boil it down to a simple term. And then that's the one true way to do the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like some of that mixed into your overall toolkit, I keep saying toolkit, is probably helpful. Like helping people remove the blockers. Hey, this can't get done. I'll step in because it's like a short-term fire and, I'll be in the trenches with everyone else to get that solved. Mixing a lot of metaphors. But but if that's to your point, if that's the only thing I do, then actually I'm not leading. I'm just the gopher, right? At some point, we're also mixing. Are those all rodents? I'm not sure. Anyway, this comes to another topic I'm obsessed with, which is like, what is your range as a leader?
Because the bigger your range, the more you can deal with, right? And I think, people with a narrow range, like they come to a new problem and they're like, but I deployed my toolkit. But their toolkit, it has like a hammer and a wrench in it, Yeah. And, I mean, this is like, if you're like Toronto raccoons, like they have a very expansive toolkit, right? So
they might actually have wrenches and hammers.
Exactly.
So that's it's super interesting. I often think about, the job not being to have answers, but to know how to get answers, right? And the humility to say, I don't know how to do that, but my role is to figure out how to do that. And I will lead us and I will make the hard decisions when we realize we only have half the information and we're just going to pick a path versus, I have, as you said, I've deployed my toolkit and I'm out of answers. What you also raised the concept of feedback loops in there, and I was a little nervous that we were going to leave the topic with everyone thinking, "Oh, I should be a mercenary and switch jobs every 6 months to keep adding more skills." And one of the things that I've also been thinking about, and you covered to some degree in the book, is the time horizon or like length of feedback loop as you grow in your role. When you write unit tests, you write code, your code passes unit tests, I'm done. Great. Super short, right? But we decided to organize the company, the engineering team in this way, right? It's like months before the dust is even settled, let alone, a year before you see whether that was actually more productive than the previous way. And so I do think, jobs that aren't serving you, et cetera, like that's a real topic, but also sticking around long enough to understand the outcomes of the decisions that you made is, I think, it's a factor, right, in your ability to make future decisions, right? Like really getting that. And as those decisions get bigger, again, the time horizons and the feedback cycles get longer and longer.
Yeah, I think if I could go back, this is something that I would probably change the way that I approach it, because I 100% think that there are people in jobs that they should quit and they haven't. But I also think that some of the people who are having the hardest time in this market are people who, like, every time they've run into an obstacle, they've gone to the market and got another job because it was so hard. Right. And I do think that like knowing why you're unhappy does not mean you have to quit. But like knowing why you're unhappy, I do think is like job one, right? Because there's a huge difference between going to your manager and saying, I don't really feel like I'm growing here, and going to your, and just like not even going to your manager, but just being really miserable until somebody's like, hey, what's up? And if you know what you need, then there are so many different ways to get it, like maybe, I don't know, one, you can go to your manager and you can ask for things, right? It's harder to get stuff than it used to be, but like you can definitely, you'll get a lot further having an open conversation, because at least you'll have information. Like maybe nothing's ever going to change, in which case definitely look for another job, but maybe they just didn't know you wanted something and they can do stuff for you. And then the second thing is like, you can go and like explore your options elsewhere. Like one of the things that I did in the pandemic was I took the full coach training course, because I had kind of taken my own advice. I'd been at my previous job, I had larger teams, and I'd kind of taken a kind of lateral move. I had a much smaller team, and I was just like, okay, there's things I like about this, but I don't feel like I'm learning enough. And so I just filled in the learning with a different thing. And it was great. Built up the team. Now I'm like, okay, I have a full-time job again. I have the kind of scope that I think I should have, and also I just collected these things along the way.
Yeah, I think the growth, I mean, it kind of goes back to this DRI concept as well, right? Like you're seeking growth. Some of that might come in changing the way that you work, and like the things you're working on or what you're being given by your managers. And some of that might come through outside pursuits. All of that seems totally, you have to decide how you want to invest that.
But I think it comes before like you're seeking growth. It's like, do you know what you want and why? And do you know what you're prepared to do to get it? Right. Because like we could all say like, I want more money. But like if the choice is you work 80 hours a week for more money, or you move to San Francisco or London or somewhere you don't want to be and you get more money, like, is that worth it to you? Because like for some people the answer is yes. And so for some people the answer is no. But, I think just the world is full of people who will tell you what you should want. And like the only person who can truly know is you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I keep staring at the book sitting behind you. It's called The Engineering Leader, but so much of the content is valuable to someone who's not a leader. So, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that's not for me because I'm an IC, like there are many ICs who are leaders, first of all. So maybe it is a well-chosen title. But I would just say if you're thinking about how you're going to grow in your own career, there's a ton of useful insight in there that's irrelevant regardless of the role that you're in. And I do want to kind of like to wrap that whole thing, it's like a lot of it is about individuals and sort of like your perspective that you're bringing to your own sort of your focus, your happiness, your growth. But for the leaders and for those team members, it like an engaged happy team that's motivated and excited about the mission, the outcomes are going to be orders of magnitude better than the opposite, right? So, this whole kind of like I just sacrifice and we all pitch in and the team succeeds thing, like it actually doesn't work that well, like know, to your point, know what you want to get out of it, be focused on that, and then you'll be bringing sort of the right thing to the team. So I wanted to shift a little bit as we to this topic of sort of like I guess it's related, but growth mindset and what people are like how would I describe it? It's sort of like there's so much of software engineering that can feel like a factory, ironically, because while we use factory metaphors like Kanban and then whatever, lean, it's very much not. And but it can just degrade into this, like we get the tickets, we process the tickets, like a help desk or something. How do you get people out of that? Like, what does it take to get the shift to, outcomes for customers? Yeah. Which again is what the business wants. Like the business is not signed up for a lot of lines of code, right? The business, which we're all part of, just to be clear, but I'm trying to find some way of separating, right? Stakeholders, like capitalism, right? Capitalism wants outcome for customers, right? And customers want outcomes for customers. So that should be what we want. And I think that's a real opportunity for growth. And I think teams that feel like drudgery to connect these topics together start to feel like, well, we get inputs and we turn them into outputs kind of thing.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like we just keep going around the houses with like software management and like we were in this like very soft, fluffy, cuddly era of software management. And now we're in this like 996 era, and I'm just like, these all seem to miss the point for me because like teams exist for a purpose and that purpose is what you deliver. And that has really like, you can work in so many ways and deliver that purpose. You can work in so many ways and not deliver that purpose, right? Right. And so I kind of, and even in the fluffy era, it's like, make people happy, like invent, like, it's like, sure. But like, if your team is not shipping, there is like very little you can give your team in terms of treats that will make them feel good about it because software engineers want to ship. Right. So I always just think about like the outcome. Right. And so then it's a question of like, how do you get people to that outcome? And I think engineers can often, they fall in love with their code. They spend a lot of time with it, and then it's just a question of like, I don't know, at a peak snark, I'll be like, are you shipping a product or a GitHub repo? Right. But on a kind of a medium, like more kind of healthy approach, it's like, look, our work isn't done when we commit the code. Our work is done when the user has it and they're happy with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's yes, 100%. I'm kind of stuck in my head because I totally agree. And yet it seems so prevalent, right? In the industry that you get into this. And even like you mentioned 996, which is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Is it the
9 hours a day, 6 days a week, or maybe it's 9 till 9?
I thought it was 9 to 9. I can't remember. But
I don't know. I don't live in San Francisco. A San Francisco friend told me about this and they were like, are you hearing this? And I was like, Europeans would never. Like this conversation is not happening.
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I live across the bay in Oakland, but I spend a lot of time in San Francisco. We do not subscribe to this, just to be clear. But that, to your point, saying if we are working really long hours, we will get outcomes, right? Yeah. Is we probably will get outputs, but I am extremely confident, I'll throw this down just for fun, like that I could produce more customer outcomes in a regular work week than someone who doesn't know what they're trying to do for their customer will produce in those, 6 times 12 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
totally the same. Like I feel like sometimes my best work happens on the spin bike. I'm like so wound up at something and I go on the spin bike and I just find a place of calm and I'm like, oh, the answer is this, Yeah. And if I had to sit at my computer and like bang my head against it, I'm pretty sure I would cause more problems than I would solve. Yes. And I'm not a sports person, so just bear with me. But like, I've been thinking so much about elite sports lately, like Simone Biles. I'm obsessed. The coach of the UK women's football team. In Ireland, we're sad they won, but still, I think this woman is #goals, right? And like in elite sports, they used to have this like very like coaches were abusive, right? Like Alex Ferguson, Manchester United, was known to be like a very abusive manager, yell at the team and all the rest of it. And we've made this shift in elite sports where it's like, hey, we don't actually get great outcomes when we abuse the sports person because they have to get up and perform. And if you destroy their mental health, then, you know, it's bad for them. And so they've moved to this like much more humane way of operating. And also more equitable pay for women, right? Which is also important. And the results are getting much better, right? And then I'm like looking at software and I'm like, okay, well, I think we kind of missed the point a little bit in the kind of fluffy era of engineering management. But now it's like, what are we serfs working in a field for 9 hours, 12 hours a day or whatever it is? Like this was a mode of working that comes from like the industrial era where we said the machine was valuable, the human exists to operate it. And it like is like counter to basically all the research on human performance, whether mental or physical.
Yes. I think for the record and for any Man U fans listening, like the team's been a bit of a dumpster fire since Alex Ferguson left. So they might not agree with that particular part, but I take all the rest of it. Take all the rest of it in context, Man U fans. I'm sorry for you. But I do think like so much has been demonstrated in that in terms of exactly to your point, Simone Biles, like absolutely number one, except when the environment is so stressful that she's unable to perform and then can just step out of that for a minute, come back and be number one again. Right. Yeah. I mean, it just tells you so much about performance.
Yeah. Gymnastics had to have a real reckoning with it, with the whole way that they were coaching and everything they were doing, you know, and I'm like, I don't know, like I said, I know nothing about sports, but maybe the dumpster fire that is Man U actually illustrates the point because this mode of operating is very toxic. It's very short term. You might get results, but you will create a debt that you will pay for a really long time.
Yeah. Quite possibly. I am not. That's like we tapped out on all of my knowledge about Manchester United right there.
We should choose a metaphor we know more about, like rodents.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I could pick other teams in other regions. That just is like that's what I happen to know about them. And so, I oh my goodness, where was I going to go from that? So I think the in the end, right, what we're trying to get outcomes for customers. And having folks who are sort of motivated, interested, excited, engaged, whatever that is, all of those things in some various piece is critical. The manager plays clearly a large role in helping folks figure that out. Like it's not just defining the work and saying, "Hey, I need you to do this," but rather aligning the right people with the right work, making sure that that people are I keep saying growing, but that they're fulfilling their goals for themselves, really understanding that. But in order for them to do that, it does take the individuals to be honest about that, right? To have some honesty with themselves and then to have some honesty with the team. And to your point, like you're not going to get what you're looking for without asking. So why not ask, right? And if you ask, you'll get more information about the organization. And that's more information that you could use to make a decision, right? About, hey, what is the right thing for me here? Is this a place where I can get the things that I want out of work or is it not? And I think that kind of open conversation is a critical part of building that environment where folks are going to, now I'm like, trying not to go back into the football analogy because, usually what people are asking for is like, I just need $12 million a year or 12 million pounds or whatever. It's all a little bit ludicrous. So don't necessarily model all of that, but knowing who you are and what you bring to the team and what you're trying to get out of it is huge.
And I think a better answer to your question is like, I think it's imperative that leadership, we start talking about like what we're doing and why, and help people fit their work into the bigger picture. Because the ticket mindset is like, I think it's a disempowered mindset that people get into when like understanding what's going on is just too expensive.
I see. Or maybe it's not clear how you would go about that. Right?
Yeah, but I'm sure you've seen startups that are like, they're in this phase of churn. They keep reorging, they keep changing the senior leadership. Every senior leadership comes in with a new plan. Like, you know, like you never actually execute on the plan. And this is where like some level of stability is really good for people. And if you are changing that stability to be like, okay, we're changing this for this reason. Yeah. Because when people just experience themselves as like, I'm just in this ocean and nobody cares about what I'm doing and why, like that's when they start being like, okay, well, this is what I can control. I do these tickets.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, in a sense, that statement, this is what I can control. Like we want some agency and control. And if it feels like anything bigger is out of our control, then we would shrink back to the thing that I actually can understand and control, which I guess if we're talking to managers, I mean, whoever's listening to this, someone's involved, everybody's involved, like recognizing that, right? Recognizing that and taking a big part of management at many layers, right? Or leadership at many layers is taking the context and breaking it down to something that's a little bigger than the ticket maybe for that individual, but isn't just the chaos of the world. Right?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because the way you described your job, like the way that I think about my job is to make it easier for people to make decisions. So if a decision ends up with me, like whatever, I'll make it. But then I'm like, how do I stop this next time? What was not clear? What do people need to know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great framing, right? Because we often fall into the pattern, oh, I needed to make that decision, so I probably need to make decisions like that instead of doing the retro, right? Which is, okay, that's a sign. Actually, one of the other things before I start moving into the wrap up that really you put words around in a way that I've been thinking a lot about lately is implicit feedback. You know, like there's so much talk of, can I give you some feedback? Like, let me structure this following the formula that I found in my manager's book that tells you exactly like here, when you execute this behavior, then the following thing occurs and we don't want that thing to occur. Therefore, we should try, like, what could we do about the behavior? And that's great. Like, it is actually helpful to have really structured feedback like that. But the world and the environment you're in is giving you feedback all the time.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable listening to it. And that exact point, like, hey, this decision came to me, right? No one showed up probably and said, hey, Cate, can I give you some feedback? You had to, when you did this, you ended up having to make the decision. Therefore, you should consider doing this. Like that probably didn't happen, but you're saying, that's weird. I wouldn't have expected that decision to come to me. Yeah. Therefore, I should go inspect, the scenario and figure out what could I have done differently? And there's so much signal out there that I think, if you're sitting back waiting for someone to show up and say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Then it's not going to come to you.
I mean, I also think in a leadership position, often when somebody does say that, it's like, you did that deliberately, It's like, you've like decided we need to go in this direction. And you get this feedback of like, why did you do that? This direction is bad. And and you're like, okay, well, you don't see why it's important. Like this feedback is going in the bin. But then I think if you're doing the implicit feedback thing, you're like, okay, why does this person not see why this direction is useful? Right. Yeah. And it might just be because they don't want to, right? If it's one person, if 60 people are going with you and one person's whining, it probably is that person. Right. But if there's a significant amount of pushback, it's like, okay, well, this direction is very clear to me because it's my job to be clear on that. But I have not done the other part of my job, which is making sure that people understand why it's clear.
Yeah, I think it's a great takeaway to spot in that, right? And that because, well, assuming you have an organization of any size, right? Even a team of 5, you have some distribution to look at.
Yeah.
Right? Is it, although sometimes there's just the one person who's willing to speak, right? So contemplate that too, right? I got only one person was upset about this is because the other 4 people never say anything bad to you. Like ask yourself that question, but more broadly, right? Like, everyone else seems super pumped and one person is really upset versus everyone's a little, they all look a little maybe confused, maybe uncertain, maybe dissatisfied. Okay, so something bigger is happening here, which might be, I didn't provide the context. It might be, I actually have made a pretty bad decision right here. Like, let me just check myself and like see if I can get some feedback from those folks. But again, with the implicit in some way, right?
Yeah.
That concerned look with no vocalization might be enough to tell you something. So do pay attention.
Well, I think as soon as you can vocalize it too, then you can start getting other people's input. You know, like I was in my team call the other week and I was like, you know, I think sometimes something's really obvious to me. And I think I'm like, I don't realize it's not obvious to other people. And one of my directs was like, you do that. You could get better at it. I was like, okay. But I don't know if you would have pinged me out the blue and be like, this, because like clearly it happened with him. But as soon as I was like naming it, he was like, yes, that is right. I was like, fair play. Like, I'll try.
I think that's the cognitive bias referred to as the curse of knowledge, which if it's got a name and it's on Wikipedia is a good sign that you're at least not alone, right? Which is that when you have information, right, it feels much more obvious than it does to the person who doesn't have information. One of my favorite analogies that's been used for that is like charades. You know, when you know the word or whatever, and you're trying to get someone else to understand it and you're losing your mind, like it's so obvious, I've done all the hand signals or whatever. Why can't you get it? Right? It's like that feels like management sometimes because we have so much context and so much information. We don't even know where to start. Trying to relay that. So anyway, all that to say, it's a thing that many people grapple with. Don't be sad. Although I will also say one of the things that constantly makes me sad is I want to tell people about a problem. And like a fellow leader and have them say, oh, that's an easy one. This is what you do, right? But that never happens. It never happens. Everyone says, yep. Yeah, that happens to us too. You're like, oh, can't anything be easy?
I mean, I think what I'm taking from that one is like, I thought it was one pretty funny and pretty cool that my direct just said in front of everybody, like, yes, get better at that. And like maybe next time I do it to him, he'll be like, hey, you're doing that thing where you think it's obvious and I don't.
Yeah, I love, so one, just naming it, as you said, naming it and putting it out there. And there's a great book on feedback called Feedback and Other Dirty Words, I think is the title. And one of the things that they talk about a lot in that book is being very clear about the type of feedback you're seeking, right? It's like lots of people say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? But saying in advance, hey, I'm going to go give this presentation. And I struggle with assuming people know more than they actually do. So what I would like you to look for in my presentation, in my content is, does it give the necessary background to get people to the state that I want them to get to? Now you have your direct and some other folks like actively looking for that thing, right? As opposed to you give the presentation after you say, do you have any feedback for me? And they're like, I love the raccoon analogy, right?
Who wouldn't? Only a monster.
Exactly. But you get no information on whether people actually understood the thing that you were presenting because you didn't signal in advance, like this is the thing, right? And so to your point, now that you've had that conversation and said, hey, this is a thing that I struggle with, I'd like you to keep an eye out for me because it is hard. It's like that's my cognitive bias. It's going to keep showing up. You know, I don't know if you have like little hand signals so you can stop and say, let me go back just a little bit more and help you with this piece of information, or just make people really comfortable asking questions like, hey, Kate, I hear what you're saying, but I must be missing something, right? Like there's some piece here that just doesn't connect for me. And when you've made that space, right, then you've invited people to sort of have that conversation comfortably because you've acknowledged, hey, we all have flaws, right? We all have blind spots. This is my blind spot.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that like a barometer for a healthy work relationship is being able to argue. Like, I think all my favorite people I work with, we argue, like, but productively, and we don't argue personally. And it comes from this basis of like, you know, we'll argue till we get on the same page or until we'll be like, okay, you live in this page and I live in this page, but like, here is where we can interact.
Right. I love that notion. And to connect those, which is maybe where you're going, not everyone who's like a level or two below you. Oh, no.
Those people do not want to argue with me. That's fine. But like my directs, my boss, my peers, like I want us to argue. I think that's constructive.
but putting it out there and saying like, hey, these topics are like, I actually would love to have a debate with you, right? Like, not that we're screaming at each other and the F-bombs come in. Although often they do, even at lower volumes, but whatever. Like,
but something I do and something my director is like, tell me if I'm wrong on this. Or like, this is what I think, you know, do you think I'm wrong? Like, you can disagree with me. And, you know, I think over time, like, people can get that message and they'll start disagreeing. And, you know, maybe some people never will, and you'll just have to ask them in a different way. But if we think about the way that we give feedback down, right, and how much work we do to do a good job, right, and then we go to somebody below us and we expect them to do that work upwards, like, they literally can't do it. They don't have the context. They don't know what's going on. And so really, if we want to get good quality feedback, we have to do the like 80% of the work that we do to give feedback down, which is to like get the context, get the, you know, the comparisons, whatever. And then we can ask this person to do the 20% that they can do, which is to tell us the truth of their experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this all day. This has been as awesome as I anticipated, but I'm going to have to start transitioning. I want to make sure that I ask you this question because we ask a lot of people, and I love this question. How did you first know that you were an engineer?
How did I first know? I've been thinking about this all day, so thank you / why did you do this to me? But I think the less I get to write code, the more I feel like an engineer, because the way of thinking that is trained into me becomes more apparent. You know, I'm a systems thinker. I question things down to the details. I expect state to be queryable, you know. I think another thing that we do in engineering is we train people to separate their work from their person and have a different relationship with feedback. And the more I'm exposed to like other areas, the more I'm like, oh, this is like engineering thinking that was drilled into me with a level of rigor. And now I bring it to, you know, organizational design or, you know, like project management or like whatever it is that I'm doing. But I think about like the kind of core tenets of engineering, they just like exist within me.
I love that answer. It's such a great perspective. Like, when I'm doing the engineering, then of course I feel like an engineer. It's when I take myself and apply myself to different problems and see the approach that I'm like, oh, that's how an engineer would do that. That's such a fascinating. No one yet has said after I stopped doing the engineering work, that's when I knew. That's so, and you could maybe assume like, oh, I stopped and I missed it, but rather I take the discipline and the approach and the rigor and apply it elsewhere. That is really, I'm glad you thought about it all day.
Thank you.
I don't know why you were upset that I asked. That's a great answer.
I also make very intense spreadsheets. That was the first time.
Oh dear. All right, I'm going to leave that one alone because we'll go for another 45 minutes on spreadsheets. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been awesome, Cate. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who's listening. If there's someone that you'd like us to talk to, I guess find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to make it happen. And of course, if you enjoy this podcast, subscribe on your podcast provider of choice, your neighborhood local podcast provider if you have one. Share it with your friends, subscribe, and all of those other activities that make social amazing. Cate, thank you again. This has been super fun.
Thanks so much.